Part of the reason for making these videos and posting it public is for education. Primarily, it's as evidence, however. Um, when mandatory reporters refuse to do their jobs, what other options do you have? The way that the police are treated by the mental health community, by hospitals, by police officers, law enforcement in general, by the courts, by the civilian population, it's horrible. All the things you want to assume that all homeless people are. You can find people in houses with those issues. You can find people in houses who are drug addicts and alcoholics. You can find people in houses who are rapists, murderers, and all sorts of other stuff like that. Why project it onto the homeless? We're listening to a guy named Sean, I believe it's Sean Hudson, but I don't have the piece of paper handy. I do apologize. You guys have gotten to see a lot of evidence over the past few days that shows that, yeah, the abuse that I'm going through is very real. Also, people who worked at CARE, people who worked at TFCC, the DA's office, the things that they try to pretend are delusions absolutely are not. That's one of the things that this feller, he and I could definitely have a good understanding on the situation, and he could better represent CARE and what it is that they're supposed to be doing if the people there do their jobs as mandatory reporters. He's just an average Joe. He doesn't have a bunch of letters behind his name. Now, this video here, this is the third one. I want to explain to you guys a few things about turning stuff into mandatory reporters. All of these recordings show why it is that you need a friend or family member to go in with you who knows what the hell is going on, number one. And number two, somebody who knows the tricks of the trade. Because all of these guys, especially when you're trying to turn in their coworkers, will be very sly on the side with what they're doing. Trying to often change the words. Like, for example, mandatory reporter. They want to change to, oh, well, we're not investigators. It's not our job to gather evidence. No, it's not your job to gather evidence. And it is not your job to investigate. However, it is your job to turn it in right away. Now, the situation with CARE is that the number of people who have committed felonies there is definitely not okay. Let's take all of this in the proper perspective, because the disabled, the elderly, and children all fall under the vulnerable category. And I happen to have physical disabilities too, by the way. But you ignore the mandatory reporter laws, except in the case of little girls being raped, pretty much. Now let's put that same kind of energy into the elderly and the disabled. And let's put it in perspective that way as well before we finish playing what this guy was saying. We'll replace elderly or disabled with girl, and we will, instead of saying physical assault or sexual assault, financial abuse, systemic abuse, we will say rape, because that's what you care about. So let's say, and all of these situations, by the way, the thing that's different is that it's a little girl and rape. The rest of the scenario is the same. So let's say you've got a little girl who's been raped, and she's trying to turn it in. and she's being called mentally ill by the person who raped her and by their friends. And when she has to try to turn it in to a mandatory reporter, the reporter says, well, I didn't see it, so I can't turn it in. So then that little girl, the person who's raping her, does it every day. And that person's friends get in on it. So she's being raped by multiple people. And she is still trying to get help. She's not being heard, and the police are sending her to mental health. Now then, she starts recording. So she's got recordings of the abuse. And this 9-year-old girl tries to turn it into a mandatory reporter and says, I have evidence of it. And the mandatory reporter says, well, have you filled out the housing paperwork? I'm going to need you to fill this piece of paperwork out right here, and then we're going to have you fill out some housing paperwork. Is that okay? No, it's not. And she says, hey, I'm here because I was raped. I have this video that shows that it's happening. It's been ongoing. They're still doing it. And of course, the mandated reporter says it's in the past. We can't do anything about stuff that's in the past. The girl says, you're a mandatory reporter. That girl's been having to deal with multiple assailants now because the first mandatory reporter didn't want to do their job. So this 9-year-old girl has to continually be raped. People got all sorts of ideas about what she should be doing. They like to give her advice, tell her that she just needs to love herself, ask her if she's taken any medications. Maybe if she takes meds, she'd feel better. When that 9-year-old girl is being raped, why the hell would you want to give her medications? Is that going to stop the situation? No, it's not. Is giving her housing paperwork going to stop that situation? No, it's not. Doing your job as a mandatory reporter right away when it makes a difference. That is what that girl needs. Now then that girl, later on, she gets raped to death. Legally, all of those mandatory reporters who blew her off are responsible for that because they did not do their jobs. They refused to look at the evidence. Now, if the only way that that girl has to send evidence is to post it up on YouTube, how horrible is that? She has to post up this trauma on YouTube and Facebook because none of her friends or family will listen. They don't care. They're too busy giving advice, and bad advice, like you just need to love yourself. Well, why would you assume I don't love myself? If I didn't love myself, I wouldn't be trying to get help. What you have to look out for with mandatory reporters, first of all, them talking over you repeatedly and saying the same thing over and over again as if you hadn't heard it the first time. Generally, that's an indicator that they don't want to hear what you have to say. They want you to end what it is that you're saying, and after they've interrupted you at the same point, exact same point repeatedly, they're going to tell you that you're talking in circles. They're going to tell you that you're just repeating yourself. Reality is, you didn't get to finish what you were saying. One of the things that they'll do is say that the people that you're trying to turn in no longer work there, or that they quote-unquote moved on. Oftentimes, they're still in the same area, and the crimes that they committed are still crimes. Are these people, because I'm not a girl and it's not rape, it doesn't matter? No, legally it does matter. Legally, I am supposed to be as protected as that 9-year-old girl. Legally, these mandatory reporters are just as responsible. When they try to say it's in the past, you explain to them it's frequent and ongoing, and it is still ongoing. Just because it's not happening right this moment does not mean that it's a delusion. Another thing they'll try to tell you is that because they didn't see it, they can't turn it in. That's not true either. If a 9-year-old girl comes in and tells you that she was raped, you better fucking turn it in. You better turn it in right away. And that's not a threat. Legally, you are responsible. You do have to turn it in. I'm not telling these people that it's rainbows and magic fucking unicorns that are doing this shit to me. Then there's when you try to show them the evidence, they refuse to look at it and say, I'm not an investigator. Whether you are an investigator or not, you're a mandatory reporter. You are a mandatory reporter. One thing they'll do is they'll change the subject to another service. They always want to call another service and find out what they're supposed to do, and then they'll get back to you. And this all eats up time. All of the time that is eaten up is time where you're being treated like you didn't try to turn it in, like you never made the effort, like you're not trying to make the effort. And the things that they say are horrible. When they say, I'm not an investigator, well, I didn't come to you as an investigator. I came to you as a mandatory reporter. Are you saying that you're not going to do your job as a mandatory reporter because you're not also an investigator? That's not how it works. Preachers are mandatory reporters. They're not investigators. Teachers are mandatory reporters. They're not investigators. Nurses and doctors are mandatory reporters, and they're not investigators. And then, of course, when it comes to the abuse at CARE, yes, CARE needs to look at what's going on there and do something about their staffing when it comes to that. Which means that they do need to look at the evidence of the abuse, acknowledge that it's happening, and do something about it. When they say it's not their job to go through evidence and stuff like that, that's another thing that they'll do. Well, I'm not saying it's your job to go through evidence, but if you're refusing to turn it in immediately because you didn't see it, well, I've got a recording of it right here. I can show it to you. You don't want to see the recording. You say it's not your job. You're a mandatory reporter. That's your job. You need to do your job as a mandatory reporter. I'm not asking you to investigate. When it comes to the issues with CARE versus the issues with the mandatory reporter stuff, yeah, those both go very much hand in hand. But then there's the fact that the files and the information that they wanted to put in there is incorrect. People who are not qualified to make these decisions wrote down a lot of things that were incorrect, even after knowing that those things were incorrect. And those things made their way into my court and prevented me from having an honest court date. And then I'm sent back to these same people again and again as if there's going to be anything different. One of these people has to do their job as a mandatory reporter. And here's the thing. If the girl comes up to you and says, hey, I was raped, I've got evidence from 6 months ago. Oh, shit. Electricity just... Nope, not the electricity. I guess it was just bleeping. If a little 9-year-old girl tells you that she's got evidence that she was raped 6 months ago, and she's got evidence that she's come to this place because she was sent there by the police, and this place for 6 months wanted to push the housing thing but not do anything about the abuse, and the abuse continued to happen, and people are threatening to kill her, people are physically assaulting her, people are calling her a child molester and a rapist and a murderer, all because she's trying to get help stopping frequent and ongoing abuse. because she deserved to be treated like a rapist or a murderer or a child molester because she's trying to turn in the rapes that were committed against her that are still happening. And because she's doing what she's supposed to by going to mandatory reporters. And some of these mandatory reporters want to say things like, oh, well, you should get a hold of this person and try to talk to them. Try to talk to them like an adult. And when you try to talk to them like an adult, they play victim and pretend that you're stalking them. Well, that's not okay. The staff at CARE have on multiple occasions attempted to bully me, threaten me, and intimidate me because they don't want to do their jobs as mandatory reporters. Now that guy, he says who it is that it's supposed to be turned into. But I had to go to those places alone, and they did the same thing that CARE did. Sent me in circles. They are all mandatory reporters. All of them. They all equally refuse to do their fucking jobs. All of them. Now, this guy at the very beginning, he listened very well. Most of this through here is me talking. Autistic people tend to info dump. People who have just experienced a traumatic incident tend to info dump. Like when they're talking to the police, for example. Well, for me, it's been a non-stop fucking trauma ride for the last 10 goddamn years. I hurt my back in October of 2015. It is now 2025. I have not been able to run in that long. And each one of these mandatory reporters will try to pretend that it's not their job to do the job of a mandatory reporter and try to send you to another agency. Every one of these agencies will do this. This is why you need a friend or family member to go in with you. We're going to press play on this despite the fact that I've talked through 17 minutes of it, and you're going to get to hear this guy saying a lot of the same stuff, like the things that mandatory reporters are supposed to do versus what this guy's, let's see, I think we were 17 minutes in. Close enough. I'm being treated inhumanely and being run around in circles.
So what, I guess, the only thing that we can do is, if someone is wanting to, if an adult with disabilities is wanting to file a report with the Oregon Department of Human Services, we can help facilitate a call to the Oregon Department of Human Services. Usually that is done when someone is unable to make that call themselves. Again, without knowing the details of what, kind of abuse you're referring to.
A lot of physical assaults and also mandatory reporters who don't want to do their jobs and have lied, which has affected me in court. I've got evidence of the CARE employees and TFCC employees lying knowingly on my paperwork, and that's going to follow me everywhere until we actually go through and get that stuff taken out of there. A lot of people were mad at me because I told on them. I shouldn't have had to tell on mandatory reporters who just didn't want to report. As far as the Health and Human Services, that's what I've been trying to do this entire time. I get run around in circles. I spend all of my money running around all the different places that CARE sends me to, and TFCC sends me to, and Tides of Change sends me to, and Northwest Senior and Disability Services sends me to, and the Sheriff's Department sends me to, and the DA's office sends me to, and the police department sends me to, and I'm trying to get you to understand that I've been going around in circles here in Tillamook alone since 2022.
And I appreciate that. I guess what I'm trying to suss out is, CARE's small organization is really...
We're going to pause that a second because it's getting pretty windy, and I do apologize for that. We'll back it up a little bit.
alone since 2022.
You know, and I appreciate that. I guess what I'm trying to suss out is, CARES CARES is a small organization, and really, our services are really just getting people indoors, whether that's shelter or housing. We really don't, we aren't able to do much beyond that. And it sounds like what you're looking for is something besides that.
A mandatory reporter. Those phone calls to the Health and Human Services, yeah, that's what should have been done from the start. And
He's saying that he doesn't know what kind of services I need. Well, housing, definitely, yeah, fine. That is something that I need. But I need mandatory reporters to do their jobs. Also, the abuse that I'm having to endure is because mandatory reporters didn't want to do their jobs, and then after the fact, they wanted to play stupid and pretend I was delusional. Now, these guys, if I have to try to turn this in by myself, I'll get talked in circles. I'm a disabled person. I can't defend myself against these people. Someone needs to recognize that I am enduring this abuse, which means they do need to take a look. You do need to look at the evidence and call them up and tell them it's true. That's what you need to do. Not bullshit me about how you're not a goddamn investigator.
there definitely should be a record of it. The stuff that you guys have as far as what you have in your records about me, yeah, we do need to go over those, and I have asked for a copy of that more than once. I was told that they can't give a copy to me, they can only give it to the police.
Well, let me do this. I have not talked with National about this, so I don't.
Sorry, the rain. Fuck it, I don't think I got much choice in it. This is the resources I have to do this with. I'm sorry, I don't know how to do all the special electronic stuff to make all sorts of pop-ups in the corners here for you and all that fancy stuff you want to see, but honestly, this is not for my audience. This is not for my quote-unquote fans. This is for evidence purposes, for educating people, and helping to put a stop to this. All of these mandatory reporters that I went to wanted to change the subject over and over again. That's not okay. Just because I don't have a friend or family member that goes in with me doesn't mean that it's okay to neglect your duties as a mandatory reporter.
If there is a file or not, I'm very happy to do that. And if there is a file, I'm very happy to arrange for you to release that to you.
Yes, sir. Also, I've been trying to. So I'm told that I have to go through you guys about the abuses that happen there.
You do not. You absolutely do not. If there is, it sounds like somewhere either. Obviously, if there's an assault, obviously that is a police issue. If there's an abuse of someone with, an adult with developmental disabilities, that is an Oregon Department of Human Services matter in terms of investigation.
Well, the issue is that somebody needs to look at the evidence and help me to turn it in. Otherwise, I get run around in circles. My disabilities are ignored. My abilities are ignored.
Let me pause this. The wind's starting to pick up. Yeah, I live in basically a giant trash bag. It's not optimal, but it's what I got. Now, this guy, instead of generalizing and saying he's going to do stuff, how about we look at the evidence first? How about we look at this stuff so that when you call these people, you know what to tell them? That way, when you call these people, you can tell them Sean is being assaulted by such and such. It is frequent and ongoing. Instead of calling them up and saying, well, this guy thinks he might be assaulted. Jesus fucking Christ. If you guys looked at the lazy shit that mandatory reporters wrote, even after seeing evidence that these things are absolutely true, yeah, there is no hope for this fucking country.
My evidence is ignored. We never get to the point where anybody ever actually looks at evidence, and that's the point where, like, your coworkers at CARE, the people that you just started working with, I've had to deal with this with them since 2022. Also, I apologize for my voice raising. It started raining here, and like I said, I live in a plastic tent. So,
let me, Sean, let me do this. Let me both inquire about anything that we may have in terms of the file, but let me also understand. I'm actually going to reach out to ODHS and understand what the process is or what an appropriate agency may be here in Tillamook, and let me see.
I've been to every agency in Tillamook. That's the problem. I have been to CARE dozens of times. I've been to THCC dozens of times. I've been to...
I'm going to pause this a moment. That's something really important. No passing the buck. You're a mandatory reporter. I'm telling you about abuse. I have evidence of the abuse. That includes against your coworkers, the people that he's now basically boss of. And yes, he does need to take a look at that. Otherwise, he's not going to turn it in. We're going to be stuck at this long distance over the phone crap instead of him looking at evidence. And if he doesn't look at the evidence, then he doesn't feel like he has to turn it in. That is more than likely the scenario that we are in at this point in time. The reason for that, well, we'll get to continue playing it for you.
The FCC dozens of times. Sorry, TCCHC. I've been to the police dozens of times.
What I want to do, though, is because if there is a...
Wind. All right.
Again, if there's an abuse of someone with developmental disability, ODHS is who oversees that. I want to understand from them if who the appropriate agency is here locally or what it is.
All right, so one of the things is if you've got the right information, you can make the right decisions. When you're going out of your way not to hear what the person's saying, or you hear what the person's saying, but you're going out of the way not to look at the evidence, you're not getting to know the situation. If you don't know what a person's problems are, how are you going to help them with those problems? If there are issues with housing that this person has, well, you need to know what those issues are instead of talking over them. No matter what the issue is, if they're supposed to help with housing, maybe they should listen to the housing issues. If they're going to do a job that requires them to be mandatory reporters, they do need to do their job as a mandated reporter.
Involved in that work. So I'll take a look at any file here may have, which I agree, if you have any file, you certainly are welcome to access to that. But then secondly, I actually want to find out from ODHS who would be the agency that someone would be reporting to, what the steps and what the right process is for that. So I'm happy to do both of them.
Yes, sir. Another thing is that
I've gone through the processes. That's the problem. Much of the abuse that I'm having to turn in is the fact that the processes don't work because these fucking dumbasses won't do their goddamn jobs when we go in about being fucking abused. So then we have to be afraid to go in to turn in abuse. And then they say, oh, well, why didn't you try turning it in? I fucking did, Jesus Christ. But we're getting run in circles. These are exactly the circles we got to go through. Now, he says he's going to do these things. But when he comes back to me, the information that he's going to be haven't gathered to tell me about is going to be based on his goddamn ignorance because he hasn't looked at a single piece of fucking evidence. And he's not going to turn it in because he hasn't looked at the evidence.
Some of the things that have done by care employees are just misdemeanors, but some of them are felonies. The situation with you being the new director, I would like to be able to show you the situation with the people that you have working there currently, and how this is played out. How they keep, when I bring something in, I'm assaulted a lot, and every time that I bring something in, I'm redirected to the housing thing, which you've already addressed, and thank you for that. The reason I'm bringing it up...
Now let's pause this for a second. We're going to go back to that 9-year-old girl. If that 9-year-old girl is trying to turn in rape, should she be pawned off onto housing? Let's say it wasn't rape. Let's say she was just beaten up. Should she be pawned on housing by mandatory reporters? They did not do their jobs immediately. That is the problem. None of these people did their job immediately like they should have.
Is because with the housing thing, we really need to be on the housing thing. Russell said that we're going to need me to get my disability money back, so I got that started. I'm getting my check every month, but none of the back pay, which is also important, which he helped to get started. There's a lot of stuff that he helped to get started, and as soon as I got Shelly, it all just basically slagged out. And, most of the time she doesn't even show up. And when I am told that I have to go into care because they're supposed to advocate for us, when I go into care and I tell the care employees down at the lower building about whatever it is that I'm having to turn in there, then they tell me, oh, well, we'll set you up an appointment with Shelly. Shelly sent me a message earlier today saying that she's not going to work with me anymore. So as far as the housing goes, we still haven't made any progress on the housing with that. Russell helped me to get the bank account that I would need. He helped me get all of the stuff that I would need that housing was going to request as soon as I'm accepted somewhere.
Although this is info dumping, it is all important information and important details.
But, sorry, it's raining again.
You are wanting support with housing, is that correct?
Yeah, I filled out that house.
We got to pause that. He was talking about housing paperwork, which has already been done. They've literally lost my housing paperwork repeatedly. And Russell can attest to that.
Housing paperwork since 2022. I've done that repeatedly. Yeah, I've never been against the housing. What I'm against is the fact that we're not getting housing, and
I'm against housing being pawned off in lieu of doing their jobs as mandatory reporters. I'm being blown off. The abuse that I'm having to endure, these are criminal acts committed against me, and these guys don't turn it in right away. They ignore it. They ignore their responsibility. They ignore their duty, and they ignore any piece of evidence that shows that they were wrong. Now, this guy's new. We're trying to give him the benefit of the doubt.
After I fill out the paperwork, we're not doing anything about the abuse. When I was sent to care, I was sent to care because I was told that you guys would have... It was literally over a room when I was sent to you guys in 2022. I was told that the police did not have a room that a victim could sit down in and write a police report and gather the evidence. I was told that care would have that. I went to care for that. Care sent me to TFCC. TFCC said that they have plenty of rooms, but not for that. And it also ended up being a situation where I'm told along the lines who it is that's a mandated reporter and who's not. So I'm trying to turn in the assaults to mandatory reporters, and they're telling me, oh, we only deal with housing, or my primary job is housing, but they're still mandatory reporters. And that's the issue not just with all of these other agencies, but also with CARE, also with Melissa.
I'm talking to him at that
keeps
point.
going out of her way to cut off anybody who's willing to do that or willing to try. And also the stuff that's in my file that Miss Shelley destroyed, like that's evidence that I went in repeatedly as I was supposed to turn in the things that I was told to. I'm sorry if that sounds too generalized, but there's a lot of specific situations with a lot of details in each individual situation.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to clarify though, and it sounds like you've had success with Russell, so I'm going to see if maybe his position has changed here. I'm going to see whether or not he might be able to provide some continuity on the housing work. There's a difference between reporting and investigating, and so if CARE would not be involved at all with gathering evidence or doing any kind of investigation.
Yes, sir, and I'm
Word to the wise. Even if the bag says pipe tobacco, you don't want to smoke it out of a pipe. Fucking Christ. We gotta back up and replay what this guy just said.
Here, I'm going to see whether or not he might be able to provide some continuity on the housing work. There's a difference between reporting and investigating, and so.
Yes, I know that. This is one of the things that I get to hear over and over and over again. If you've ever had to try to turn this stuff in by yourself, you guys are used to this. If you've ever had friends or family members